Welcome to Life Recovery Today with Stephen Arterburn. In the next half hour, you'll obtain insights and tools to transform your life using the biblical principles found in the 12-step program. We believe everyone can benefit from a life recovery experience because we all have struggles in life. Struggles with addictions, food, depression, anxiety, and relationships, to name a few. You'll be encouraged to see how others have found a new way of life with hope for the future through life recovery. Your host is Steve Arterburn, founder of New Life Ministries and Women of Faith, author of over 100 books, and teaching pastor at Northview Church in Carmel, Indiana, one of the 20 largest churches in America. Steve is the co-editor of the Life Recovery Bible, the #1 selling recovery Bible. With over 3 million copies sold, this is the Bible given to inmates by Prison Fellowship and the Pew Bible for the Salvation Army. Now here's Steve.
Hi there, Steve Arterburn here, and welcome to Life Recovery Today. If you haven't recovered your life, God would sure love to help you do that. And a lot of times our trouble, it starts pretty young. Our family of origin has had an influence on who we are today. Would anybody doubt that? I mean, some of us, we want to pretend that our family was or is almost perfect. And I've never seen one of those kinds of families. Others of us may tend to avoid responsibility for our actions by blaming everything on our family. So we don't take responsibility for anything because they were so bad. I'll tell you, as a strategy in life, blaming someone else for all your problems, that's right down there at about a 1 on the scale of 1 to 100 as getting the life that you're looking for. Whatever the case, when we think about our own life, we also need to deal with our family and the effects its members have had on who we are today. I had 3 older brothers, and I got to tell you, when that middle brother beat me with a tennis racket, that was pretty horrible. And when my mother asked what I did to egg him on, that was devastating. Because I didn't do anything except just be me. Maybe she thought that was bad enough. Well, step 4 says we made a searching and fearless inventory of ourselves. And in Nehemiah 9:2, we're told that the Jewish exiles confessed their own sins and they confessed the sins of their ancestors. They blamed their ancestors for their captivity. And the difficult situation that they were first facing was all about them. Well, it's all right to express our anger and regret over, what's been done to us, what's gone on before us. We can even hold people accountable. We can grieve over the negative effects of their actions and how that has impacted. All that is okay. But to use that as an excuse for us doing wrong things, well, that's just going to keep us in bondage. Now, today, one of my favorite people, Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris. I love saying that name as much as Rancho Cucamonga. But Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris, one of the co-hosts on New Life Live, is a person who understands the importance of not staying in bondage. She's been there and she's found a way out. A wonderful believer, a very, very bright psychologist. Dr. Mack grew up in a home where addiction was present, and she understands how that impacts a young person whenever addiction is there from the beginning. It has an effect on the entire family, especially the little ones. But every family member seems to adapt, adjust, or find a different path in the midst of the same kind of trauma. So I want you to hear from her about the effects of addiction on not just her family, but all families. Now, we never want to blame what we're going through on family of origin. But I'll tell you, there's something awfully wonderful to hear that it makes sense why we've gotten in trouble, because that's the way things were. It makes sense that we haven't sought help until now, because of the impact of the way it was back then. And so we don't just use that to do nothing. I use it to be inspired and motivated to clean up the mess that started long before I was born. When you start to do that, recovery is possible and freedom is the outcome.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris. I am one of the co-hosts of New Life Live Radio, and today I'm going to talk about addiction in families. And I'm going to start with me, share a little bit about my own background, my own family story, and hopefully give you a few pointers on how to make some changes in your own family. I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and I have a little brother and a little sister, and we are pretty spread apart. So I am what we would call a parentified child. Growing up, though, I was just the oldest kid, and I was the kid with the responsibility to take care of the other kids. And I had to be in that position because my dad is an alcoholic. And as I was growing up, we'd have great times during the week, and then the weekend would come and they would get drunk and he would get angry and he would get violent, and then the weekdays would come and things would be great again. And he did not believe that he was an alcoholic because he only drank on the weekends. And I remember my mom saying, "It's the alcohol. This just isn't him. It's the alcohol." So that was important because it was confusing to us of how she could stay in this relationship with this person who we all thought was so awful. She had known him for so long, and she had other memories of him from their childhood, and she could see the good in him when I couldn't. And I, being a kid, was just feeling like why so much responsibility was being put on me when these were all roles that they should be taking on as parents. Growing up, I learned that I would need to do things for myself because I couldn't trust the adults in my life to do things for me. And that was one of the effects of having addiction in our family, because my mom was so busy dealing with the emotions and the battles with my dad and the alcohol, and my dad was busy dealing with the battle of fighting with her because he really didn't think he had a problem. He felt like she was the problem, that they didn't have time or energy to focus on us as the children. So that was my job, to make sure that children were okay. When my dad finally got sober, it was because everybody was gone. My mom and my brother moved away. I had gone to the military, so I'd moved away. My sister had moved to another state, and she was a teenager still, but she had moved out, and so he was home alone. And I remember him telling me that that was his bottom. He had hit the place where he was all alone, and I think that that was his greatest fear, was to be alone. And so he started a recovery program. That would be about 34 years ago now. And in his recovery program, he had to make amends. He had to figure out what was emotionally going on underneath all of the cover-up of alcohol. He had to figure out what emotions were driving it. So what was going on emotionally that was propelling him towards addiction. And as he went through that process, the rest of the family was in a healing process as well. And so what I learned through my own recovery is that I had taken on some things in my life that had become almost character traits because of being this parentified adult, because of the addiction. It made me feel like I was the one who was responsible for everyone. I was responsible for my siblings. If anything happened to my parents, I was the one that needed to take care of it. And this translated in my life to being a workaholic, to being the person who is always feeling overwhelmed by other people's emotions because everybody would come to me with their things. And eventually over time, I learned to turn all that emotion off. And so I got to the place where I was emotionally avoidant. And that made me feel safe. That made me feel strong. That protected me. I basically armored up. And I put a wall around me to keep me from getting hurt. I just didn't care enough to care. And that way, nobody could hurt me. And that came out of just being disappointed so often as a child. Having an expectation of parents and then having the parents not meet those expectations was devastating. And it made me feel so unsafe that I eventually had to learn how to not feel my feelings, but I also learned how to not feel other people's feelings. That's really kind of how I was able to stay in relationship with my family. Me and my mom and my dad, we get along great. We travel together. My husband would say that my dad is his best friend. We are super close, not to the point of enmeshment where we don't have our own lives now, but we are super close. And I think that we were able to stay in relationship through all of the difficulties of alcoholism because I was avoidant, because I learned to turn off my emotions so that I didn't get hurt. Because when people hurt me, I had a tendency to cut them off completely. This also comes out of growing up in a family of addiction. Because I was in this family I couldn't get away from, I will not tolerate that from anyone outside of the family. So I've had people in my life who have hurt me or I felt betrayed by, and I was always so quick to, I'm done, just cut them off, as a way of protecting myself. Because growing up, when people hurt me, I had to be in that relationship because it was my home, it was my house. I couldn't get away. I told myself as an adult, that would not be the case. I would not be around people who would hurt me. And so that impacted me in that I don't have old friendships. I don't have long-standing, long-term relationships from my youth because I would cut people off because it just hurt too much to be in relationship with them. One of the ways in which I overcame that was to do my own work around addiction and addiction recovery. I had to learn why I would cut off, why I would shut down. It was self-protective. That armor made me feel as though I was safe, made me feel as though I would be okay. The problem is it still didn't get me what I wanted, which was connection and attachment and intimacy in relationship. And so I've had to do my own work to be able to overcome the barriers that I will put up as an emotional avoider to having a fulfilling, intimate relationship. I've had to go through my own recovery and really take a look at what am I avoiding? What am I trying to get away from? And when have I felt this way before? What are the feelings that are coming up in this situation? And where am I experiencing these feelings in my body? And why am I experiencing them? What happens when I experience them? And the more that I've done that, the better able I have been to name what's happening and to assign the meaning to it that is true and not just a trigger from my childhood. Because I can look back now and go, oh, I remember feeling this when. And then I can ask myself, is this what I'm experiencing now, the exact same thing, or is this something different? And that brings me into the present moment. Because one of the problems for emotional avoiders is that they aren't often present in the moment because they are shut down and tuned out in order to protect themselves. I learned that that self-protective mechanism that I was using for all those years that was a great survival tool was stopping me from getting what I really wanted in my relationships in the present time. So now I can name what's going on, and then I can take a risk and ask for my need to be met. And when you grow up in a family of addiction, you don't want to take risks and you don't want to ask for a need to be met. And it was in recovery that I learned how to do that. I learned how to put my needs out to the person who says they love me and are in relationship with me, and to wait for their response. And most of the time, that need is met. Most of the time, my husband, my mother, my sibling, they're able to meet that need. And when they can't, we can have a conversation about it. It's not just a complete cutoff anymore. I can tolerate their truth as well as I can share my own. And so I hope that those of you who may be dealing with addiction, having addiction in the family, when you hear this, that you feel encouraged that there is help available. Even if you are not the person with the addiction, there is help available for you as a family member. There is still recovery to be had for you, and it can be life-changing and help you get to the place where you're having the kind of relationships you want to have because you're able to show up emotionally and be present and manage some of your past triggers.
It's hard to find a trusted friend when you're in crisis. someone who's been there and understands, but who also has the training and skill to give you practical help. Family, friends, and churches want to help, but often they're not equipped to care for those dealing with problems like addiction and pornography, infidelity, anger, depression. New Life Ministries is here to provide help and hope in life's hardest places. We're not focused on making people feel better. We're focused on helping people do the work that will help them be better. At New Life, we have resources available to help you, like books, DVDs, CDs, workshops, and our network of licensed counselors. If you need help, call 1-800-NEW-LIFE and begin your new life today.
Welcome back. You know, it's often said that for everything to change, well, everything has to change. Jacqui Mack knows that living with an addict has an effect on every member of the family. But it's also unique how that impact or that influence hits the family experience and then is recreated in another family in the future. But we can become the transition generation where it doesn't always just get passed along. That's what I want for you, and that's what Jacqui Mack-Harris wants for you. Here's what I've come to discover. No one thing changes everything. But one thing, left unchanged, can destroy every area of your life. We want to get the destruction out of the way. Let's listen to Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jacqui Mack-Harris. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and one of the co-hosts here at New Life Live Radio. And today I'm going to be talking to you about addiction and how it really does impact everyone in the family, and it impacts the family and the family members in different ways. It can, for the person who is addicted, right, they may have one set of issues around their drinking or their drug use or gambling or whatever their addiction is, whether it's a substance or a process. There are different things that they do to keep that cycle going. The rest of the family contributes in different ways as well. Some people become codependent. This is the person who really wants to take care of and love on and help their partner. And then so there's this back and forth of need where the one person needs to be needed. And so they are doing things for the person that might really enable them to remain in their addiction, but they're doing it because they need to be needed. It feels good to take care of people. It feels good to make people happy. Unfortunately, they're stuck in this cycle where they're doing something that might actually just be helping this person continue to be stuck. And so there's help for that. You can go, there's a Codependency Anonymous, there is recovery, so there's help out there for that. You can also end up with people in the family who have depression, right? The kid who doesn't have any hope that things will ever be different because there's been so much neglect and so much loss of connection. There's no attunement. The parent is either busy in their addiction or fighting with the partner that's busy in their addiction. And so then we have depression. You might, as a spouse of someone addicted, become depressed. Anxiety is a challenge for families where there's addiction because that kid or that partner just never knows what they're going to get, or maybe they know too well what they're going to get, so they're just always on edge, and then they become hypervigilant. They spend a lot of time expending a lot of busy energy trying to stay safe, right? Anxiety is our fire alarm. It's the result of that fight, flight, freeze that happens in our body, and physiologically the body starts to, we get stronger, we get faster, we might even get louder, we might become more aggressive, we may become super busy or agitated, and there are times when we are feeling anxious and there's absolutely nothing wrong, right? We feel like a tiger's chasing us, but we're sitting on the sofa. The TV's not even on. There's no reason for feeling in your body like you need to run and you need to get away. But when you've lived in a family with addiction, you are in that revved up state of danger so often that your body will kind of jump into it at inopportune times. And it could be because a thought passed through your mind, or you may have a trigger that is auditory where you heard something. It might be something you smell or something you see, and you may not even be aware that these things are triggers because of whatever the situation was that occurred in your history that kind of locked that into your limbic system. There's a part of our brain that houses memory and emotion, but doesn't necessarily have a date time stamp. And so we learn to deal with things that are tragic or things that really are intolerable, right? Steve would say we learn to tolerate the intolerable. We learn to deal with these things in certain ways. We find our survival mechanisms, we find our tricks and our tools, and that helps us survive the situation. It helps us survive our childhood with an addicted parent. It helps us, or an addicted sibling, right? It helps us survive. But then when we are no longer living in that situation, our body is still trying to survive that same way. And so it's really important for family members to recognize that while you may not have been the one with the addiction, you were living in the experience of the addiction. You were living in the home. There is a certain energy that addiction brings about. There's a certain energy that the fight with the addicted one brings about. There is an energy in the family that we're not going to talk about this if that's a rule. There is a kind of a way of doing life together that either excludes the person that's addicted or makes excuses, for lack of a better term, for the person. And we begin to do this just kind of routinely in our families. And everybody has a role. And the person who's addicted would be what we would call the identified patient. But then there are supporting characters. And so I think it's really important for us as family members to recognize that we do have a role in the addiction in the family. And if we want to see change, then we have to take responsibility for ourselves and the role that we play. And that is maybe different. Like the way that I responded to alcoholism in the family is different than the way that my sister responded to alcoholism in the family, which is different than the way my brother responded to alcoholism in the family. But we each had a role that we played at the time we were growing up in that home, and we each had a role as we became adults, and we each now have a responsibility to ourselves and our own families, right? Our own family units that we now have. We have a responsibility to do our work and to gain healing so that we are not continuing to traumatize our family, continuing to put restrictions and limitations on the family out of fear of what was. And so what I would recommend is that you get into a recovery program, reach out, try to find a good Christian counselor that can be supportive of you as you're on the journey. One, to discover what you would need to change in order to feel more yourself, in order to feel healthy, in order to be present in your current family, on your job, if you're in school. And we're in a season that's just been really heavy and challenging, and we're noticing a lot of people are drinking more, using drugs more, because there's been so much change that's happened, so much restriction that's happened, so much unknown. And so you might find yourself being more anxious than you've ever been before, and it might be triggering some old memories and some old feelings from your childhood that you didn't even know you had. So if you could reach out to someone and get help, you could start the recovery process for yourself. You could start to move through, not not necessarily just pass, but move through the grief and move through the trauma and move through the depression and the anxiety and learn how to regulate your emotions, learn how to manage any stressors that might lead you to feel more anxious or lead to addiction. And one of the ways you can do this is by giving us a call here at New Life, and you can call 1-800-639-5433, and we would love to help you find a counselor that can join you on this journey. Thank you.
Life recovery isn't just about making the courageous choice to give up an addiction or dependency. It's a journey towards health, wholeness, and becoming your very best you. If you need resources to help you in your journey, we can help. There are many life recovery resources that you can do on your own, with a group, or with your church. We have Bibles, workbooks, and devotionals that you can use to work your recovery right where you are. That's the beauty of life recovery. To learn more or to get the Life Recovery Bible or any other life recovery resource, visit liferecoverytoday.net or call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE. 1-800-NEW-LIFE.
You know, sometimes it's astounding the difficult situations that involve the people that we love. In some of those situations, well, of course, the wise course is it's hard to find. It's not clear. And a lot of times we feel a heavy burden to act. We don't have any idea what to do. You know, Abraham wasn't sure what he could do in the situation he was facing. And asking God to prevent the destruction of Sodom because of Lot and his family, that just almost seemed like a ridiculous thing to do, to ask God to change his mind. Well, he wasn't even sure it was right. And he talked it over with God, reasoning it out, trying to do whatever he could. Well, when we don't know how much of a change we can or even should make, we can start by doing what he did. Talk it over with God. You know, so often people will ask me, what in the world do I need to do to find out God's will? Well, I think it needs to line up usually with three things. God's Word, doesn't go against anything there. The word of a trusted friend or counselor or coach or person in recovery. And the third thing is the word of somebody who's really close to you and doesn't mind telling you you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Those people are really rare, but they can sure save you a ton of pain going forward. Thanks for watching. We're going to be right back here at the same time next week. I hope and pray that if you are not in recovery, you would consider that maybe the path you've taken hasn't gotten you where you want to go. And you call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE and we'll give you the steps on a brand new path.
Thanks for joining us for Life Recovery Today with Stephen Arterburn. We hope this program has helped you integrate God's truth and wisdom into your recovery journey. This program is brought to you by New Life Ministries, and it's your support that keeps this program on the air. When you contact us for any reason, be sure to let us know that you watch on NRB. Call us at 1-800-NEW-LIFE or go to liferecoverytoday.net. Please join us again next week for more Life Recovery Today.